What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name is Paul Brettel, the site editor over at Dairyland Express, where we cover the Packers, Brewers, Bucks, and Badgers. I also have a new article out every Monday and Friday over at Cheesehead TV. And as it says at the bottom of the screen here, you can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. So for today's episode, just as we've done the last few weeks, we are going to be taking a look at my four big things, my four big takeaways from the Green Bay Packers performance against Minnesota. Typically, there are just three, but this week we do have an extra one. So let's dive on into your number one seed Green Bay Packers performance against the Vikings. First up, this defense, they were able to slow and contain Dalvin Cook. The run defense, along with other parts of this defense, had been reeling in recent weeks, but especially the run defense. They are giving up 5.5 yards per rush to Baltimore, 8.8 yards per carry to Cleveland. Oof, that's awful. 8.8 yards to Cleveland. But they were able to overcome a tough test against the Minnesota Vikings, and in part, not having Kirk Cousins did make this a bit more, or a bit less challenging, I should say, for the defensive front, but they still played well. Unlike in past weeks where this Green Bay Packers defensive front was getting bullied, they were the ones doing the bullying. Kenny Clark was often double teamed, but he was very difficult to move. Dean Lowry had a nice game as well, and that interior defensive line did a very good job throughout the course of the game generating a push. In addition to that, edge rushers, Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, they've struggled in recent weeks to contain those runners. They were either getting too aggressive and challenging the quarterback, which created lanes to the outside, or they were getting too far upfield, which created running lanes past them. But this week, and Jonathan Garvin, Tipa Galaya, they were all guilty of that as well. But this week, all four of those edge rushers were much better in that regard, and it led to a much better performance from the defensive front. Now, there are other factors involved as well. One is that, as I mentioned, Kirk Cousins was not under center. It was Sean Mannion. Green Bay, they played more aggressively. Joe Barry did, which was something I was hoping to see, and that they played with more players closer to the line of scrimmage to help out against the run. In addition to that, part of it's on the Vikings. I mean, yes, they were down in the first half for pretty much all the first half. They went down 3-0 after Green Bay's opening drive, but the game really didn't become a 3-score game until those final minutes of the second half. Before that, they were down 3-0, 6-0, 13-0. I mean, yes, it's a tall task to overcome Aaron Rodgers and this offense is on the road, especially without your starting quarterback. But the game was still, and there was still a ton of time left. The game was still within reach, but they kind of abandoned the run game a little bit. Dalvin Cook only had 7 carries at halftime. Then when the second half rolls around, the Green Bay Packers offense, they help out this run defense and the fact that they kept with putting their foot on the gas. We'll get that here in a second. And the lead ballooned to 3 scores, 4 scores. And once you get to that point, you know, you're running out of time. It's incredibly difficult to sit there and just continue to rely on the run game, even if you do have someone as talented as Dalvin Cook. So at the end of the day, Cook finished with only 9 carries for 13 yards. So this was one of the big question marks coming into the game, even with a backup quarterback. We thought that Cook was going to play a big role, but the run defense, the interior defensive line, the edge rushers, they're all much improved. And then there were those other factors that we mentioned as well. But it all culminated with containing Dalvin Cook. Again, not an easy task. Next up, the Green Bay Packers offense, they stayed aggressive late into the game. Now, the recent weeks, the past 2 weeks against Baltimore as well as Cleveland, they took their foot off the gas a little bit once they had those 2-score leads, and both teams, Baltimore and Cleveland, were able to come back, and it took some big stops from this defense in high leverage situations. They stopped a 2-point conversion for the win against Baltimore. Rasul Douglas came away with an interception as the Browns were nearing field goal range, which would have given them the win. But this week we saw, and following that Cleveland game, Aaron Rodgers had discussed with reporters how he talked to Matt about how he wanted to stay aggressive. He wanted the ball in his hands in those situations because against Cleveland specifically, they were very, very passive. They had 2 fourth-quarter possessions that game. One resulted in a 3-and-out after 3 straight running plays. 2 of them were up the middle, and then this was after Josh Nijman had left the game. So it's Ben Braden in at left tackle against Myles Garrett, and they run to Ben Braden's side. Of course, as you'd expect, there was a loss of yards on that play. The next possession was stalled pretty much immediately. They tried an end around to Equinemius St. Brown, who lost 10 yards. And then at that point, in your 2nd and 20, you put yourself in a big hole. Rodgers had 2 completions, but they're only for 4 and 7 yards. Again, he wanted to be more aggressive. And I just want to add, I believe I talked about this on Saturday's video, being aggressive doesn't mean you're just chucking downfield, the entire 4th quarter, trying to hit that big play to extend the game. It goes back to, what are you doing in the 2nd quarter where each play is building off one another? When there's a good run pass mix, you're trying to remain unpredictable, that illusion of complexity that Matt LaFleur often discusses. And when you do pass the ball, it's not necessarily just a check down, trying to get the easy completion to stay in bounds to run the clock. It's still your ultimate goal is to still move the ball and to try to find the end zone. And that's not something that we were seeing in recent weeks. It was very passive, and they were of the mindset of, we just need to run the clock. And twice it almost came back and bit them in the butt. That's why Aaron Rodgers is saying we need to remain aggressive. Again, doesn't mean throwing the ball 30 yards downfield, but with the play calling and that you're trying to move, push the ball down the field, move the ball, and get those first downs and still try to score even though you have the lead. Treat it like it's the 2nd quarter and really put the opponent away. So that was one of the underlying issues from the last 2 games, but we saw Green Bay really correct that this week. And I imagine, especially given Rodgers' remarks, because we know that LaFleur is very good about listening to what he has to say and incorporating, his thoughts, strategies, everything into the game plan. So I have to imagine that went a long way with their decision-making in this game. So here they are. Packers are up 27-3, 5 minutes left in the 3rd quarter, and they put together a 7-play drive that resulted in a field goal. Of those 7 plays, 5 of them were passes. The next possession, Green Bay's up 30-10. They now go on a 10-play scoring drive with 8 passes, and it ends in a touchdown, making it 37-10. I don't think we would have seen that last week. I really don't. And there's a very real possibility that had this been a week ago, or the same mindset from a week ago against Minnesota, the game probably would have ended 27-10. So I think that was important to see that they did make that adjustment, because when you get into the playoffs and you're playing not Minnesota, not Cleveland, but you're playing Tampa Bay, Dallas, the Rams, and you have that lead in the second half, you absolutely have to make sure that you put it away. You have Aaron Rodgers, who should win another MVP. You have Devontae Adams, the best receiver in the game. And again, that doesn't mean abandon the run game whatsoever, but it also means don't run the ball 3 consecutive times between the tackles in a very predictable fashion either. And the Green Bay Packers didn't do that this week. After those 2 possessions, Love entered the game. So we won't look any further ahead, but it was nice to see them really go out and try to make an effort to correct that. Next big takeaway, do the Green Bay Packers have a return man? David Moore was signed to the practice squad on Thursday, I believe, of this past week, and he impressed. So Amari Rodgers, and this is from a recent article of mine where I gathered some numbers. So of 18 eligible return men this season, Amari Rodgers ranks 12th in average with 7.5 yards per return. To his credit, the last few games have been a little bit better in terms of, trying to accumulate some yards once he catches the ball. I think at one point this season he was 15th, 16th in this category, but overall, indecisiveness, the inability to field the ball cleanly at times has really been a huge liability for this Green Bay Packers punt return unit. On kick returns, it's Malik Taylor. He's averaging 19.4 yards return, which ranks 69th out of 100 eligible kick returners this season. And in case you're wondering, number 100 is Amari Rodgers. So those 2 units could absolutely use an upgrade, but even if Green Bay wanted to stick with them, they couldn't. Amari Rodgers was on the reserve COVID list, and Malik Taylor is on IR currently. So they needed someone back there. They went and found David Moore. He's been in the league for a few years, spent most of his time with Seattle. He came into this game with 22 career punt return attempts, averaging 8.4 yards per return. He also had 4 career kick return attempts, averaging, I believe, 16.5 yards return. So not very impressive in that regard, but still a veteran presence to provide you with some stability. He wasn't able to field any of the kick return attempts that he took yesterday. They all went through the end zone, but he did have 3 punt returns, totaled 33 yards, including a 21-yarder, which in his debut was the longest of the season for the Green Bay Packers. And outside of those numbers, what was really just refreshing to see was him fielding the ball cleanly. Once he had the ball, there was no indecisiveness. He got north, he got south. He knew where he wanted to go, and he had some very good vision as well, finding those openings in the or the punt coverage unit, and was able to turn, especially one of those runs, into a big play. So, and all the returns that he had were positive. So it was just very, very promising to see. I know it's a small sample size, but remember 2 years ago, 2019 season, this Green Bay Packers punt return unit was on an historically bad pace in terms of total punt return yardage. Tyler Irvin came in and turned that unit around immediately. Now, I'm not saying that they were great or one of the best in the league, but he made a significant difference. Hopefully, David Moore can have that kind of impact this season for Green Bay. And again, it's only one game, but it looks like he may be able to. Last big takeaway, the offensive line, they dominated this game. We know they are down 4 of their 5 preferred starters, and all things considered, they've held up very well this season with those injuries, but this performance was impressive. Aaron Rodgers had all the time that he needed in the pocket. Pro Football Focus only credited the offensive line with 7 pressures. This is their 4th straight game where they haven't allowed double-digit pressures, and Rodgers wasn't sacked once. In the run game, Aaron Jones, he was able to get to the corner. Nice job by the tackles. Nice job by the tight ends sealing those edges. Aaron Jones had success getting around the edge, the offensive line moving horizontally. And then up the middle, the bruiser, A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon did exactly what you'd expect A.J. Dillon to do in 0-degree temperatures against that Vikings defense. He averaged 4.5 yards per carry between the tackles. And you could tell coming out of halftime, that Vikings defensive front, they were tired. It was cold. They were losing. The season's over. They were ready to go home. And there were a few runs there where that Green Bay Packers offensive line just absolutely bullied the defensive front and was able to push them to the second level. It was an impressive performance. Now, I'll add, depending on which measure or rankings you use, ESPN's pass block win rate metric, the Vikings ranked 27th. They ranked 32nd in run stop win rate. So by that measurement, this isn't the most, dynamic defensive front that Green Bay is going to face. But nonetheless, again, it was an impressive performance, and they're down 4 of their 5 preferred starters. So you're not going to hear me apologizing for that performance by any means. So again, they somehow keep finding a way to play at a high level. And this week in particular, I just thought that they were really, really impressive, dominating that line of scrimmage against Minnesota in the cold at that. So there you have it. Those are my 4 big things from the Green Bay Packers victory. And of course, the 5th big thing, they are the number 1 seed in the NFC. The NFC playoffs will once again go through Lambeau Field, where the Green Bay Packers are 8-0 this season. And oh, how sweet that is. You can find all my work at Dairyland Express as well as Cheesehead TV. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Subscribe to the page, like this video. Again, I greatly appreciate you tuning in. As always, friends, take care, stay safe, and go Pack Go.